Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Terry Barclay, President and CEO of Inforum and Chair of the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. Welcome, and I'm just so thrilled to welcome you to this event about the Inflation Reduction Act, which includes $500 billion, that's billion with a B, in new spending and tax breaks targeted toward climate change, clean energy, training and workforce development, the development of clean infrastructure, and more. Although promoting clean energy is only one part of the act, it's a broad and important one that provides opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses. So this event is made possible by the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit, known by the shorthand SBND, which is funded by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation. SBND is a collaboration that was launched and funded in 2021 by the Erb Family Foundation. Its mission is a large one: to mobilize businesses and organizations of all sizes and galvanize bold action to make Southeast Michigan, with Detroit at its epicenter, a global leader in sustainability. For Southeast Michigan businesses to survive and thrive, we must understand and accelerate change to meet emerging issues and opportunities in social justice, the environment, and economic growth. The triple bottom line of people, planet, and profits is our guide. So please check us out at sbndetroit.org, which has stories, podcasts, and videos about sustainability. Really incredible content for you to browse through. You can also enter your own events there, as well as resources that you have to offer the sustainability community. And we really encourage you to think about doing that, because we hope to really build community and connections through this website. But now let me introduce our panel of experts who will help us understand the Act's provisions and many opportunities. Joel Haurani-Hiras, Director, Public Sector Consultants, will unpack what the IRA means for businesses and specifically for the city of Detroit, where he was the city's sustainability director. Jerry Davis, professor at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, will share the experience of his graduate course that is aimed at launching green startups in Detroit. Dan Ramdowski, executive director of the Centropolis Accelerator at Lawrence Tech, will focus on the Act's implications for small manufacturers and hardware entrepreneurs that he works with daily. And our moderator, Kimberly Hillnott, is president and CEO of Future Insight Consulting, which specializes in coalition building and project management with diverse audiences around climate change, environmental justice, and workforce development. Kimberly is also an expert on today's topic, so we hope that we'll hear some of her insights as well as the conversation unfolds. We're using the chat function for questions today, so just click on the icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen where Kimberly will be able to see them for Q&A. And it would be helpful if you could just note to whom the question is addressed. That will help Kimberly direct traffic appropriately during the Q&A portion that will follow the speaker presentations. So we'll welcome our speakers momentarily. But first, to get our juices flowing here, we have a brief poll question that we'd like for you to answer. So please choose one of these answers. Okay, so we have our results. Environment impact. Okay. Well, panel, you've got your work cut out for you here. And thank you for sharing what your biggest concern and interest is. That will really help direct the conversation. So now let's welcome our speakers to our virtual stage. Joel will present first, followed by Jerry and then Dan, and their presentations will be followed by Q&A. So
good morning,
Joel,
everyone.
yeah, there you are.
Good
You're
morning,
up.
everyone. Hope everyone's not good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Let me pull up my presentation here. All right, is that visible in presentation mode?
Looks great.
Okay, great. So good afternoon. I'm happy to share some of my insights about the IRA and appreciate being part of this esteemed panel of folks talking about this stuff. So for background, Eli Lieberman of Michigan Saves, who is staffed by public sector consultants, and myself presented some of this information at the Michigan Municipal League conference in the fall. So I'm sharing some of that for all of you. So I'm a director on the energy and environment team, and I mainly focus on climate and sustainability consulting for the public sector, both cities, counties, and the state of Michigan. So first I wanted to talk a little bit about Justice 40, because this is a very important screen for all the federal funding that's coming through, but specifically the Inflation Reduction Act. And really what that says through Joe Biden's Executive Order 14008 is that at least 40% of the overall benefits of this work needs to flow to disadvantaged communities. And the challenge there is that DOE and EPA kind of define disadvantaged communities a little bit differently, but there is a public website where you can look and figure out what how those are defined by the different agencies. And so these are some of the policy priorities: reducing energy burden in disadvantaged communities, decreasing environmental exposure and burdens for disadvantaged communities, improving the access to capital and jobs for disadvantaged communities. So I do laud the Biden administration for really seeking to center equity throughout the deployment of these federal funds. And so pretty much any grant application that you're going to write to procure some of these funding, you're going to need to write an environmental justice plan or a Justice 40 plan to be able to access those funds. So I think this is important because we want these investments to benefit everyone, and we know that many disadvantaged communities don't normally benefit from these to the state that they should. So it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge worth tackling. And so just a quick summary. So in our analysis, the IRA invests over $60 billion in critical clean energy, climate, electrification measures, and puts the US on a pathway to a 40% emissions reduction by 2030 through a variety of things that you can see there on the screen. And so me and my team created this graphic, which I know it's very busy. Actually, if you scan the QR code down here in the bottom corner, you should be able to download a copy of this. But basically the way this is laid out is the things on this left-hand side are more for low-income folks in our communities. So electrification dollars, weatherization, pollution reduction, some adaptation, environmental justice block grants. And then the ones in purple are more of a market rate benefits. So tax credits, both for solar and for energy efficiency, home rebate for electrification, EV tax credits. And then the opportunities here on the right-hand side are more for nonprofit housing developers, as an example, or other nonprofits. So you can see there's a number of tax credit opportunities, which Dan is going to get into a little bit deeper later, so I won't right now. And then these are some of the bigger buckets of funding available: Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, energy efficiency conservation block grants, and the state energy programs. And so I did a quick pivot here just to look at who for all the IRA dollars, who is benefiting from this. So you can see certainly municipalities benefiting quite a bit, but also businesses benefiting, developers, green banks. And this is actually like a count by category. We can also look at it by amount. So you can see the utilities when we talk about when we're adding up the total amount, utilities are benefiting as well as businesses. So just a little bit of a way to kind of think about categorizing this work and the benefits therein. So here's some grants to municipalities. So thinking about there's a number of forestry programs. There's a neighborhood access and equity program to reduce barriers for transportation, and then a number of these EPA administered grants. I'm going to probably skim through this somewhat quickly because I know that probably not a lot of municipalities on the line, but I certainly think there's lots of opportunities with all of these grants for private businesses to partner with municipalities to help expend some of these funds. Also, DOE is going to be providing funding for contractor training. So if you are in that contracting field, particularly the home residential home contracting field, I think there'll be some training available, as well as adopting more up-to-date energy codes. Again, rebates. So these are rebates that will go to homeowners, but obviously the homeowners need to hire someone to do this work. And so there's certainly a significant amount of opportunity for folks who work on the home renovation space. So you can see there's a rebate in there for energy audits. Also, the HERA program has up to $14,000 in home rebates for households making less than 80% of the area median income. And so I'm looking at the allocation that the state of Michigan is getting for both of the programs, both of the HERA and the homes program, is about $200 million. And so my basic calculations say that could be up to 5,000 houses that could take advantage of being able to electrify their home. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity for businesses that do work with homeowners to really make sure that homeowners know about the opportunities that are part of this program. And we're actively working on coalitions with Michigan Saves and others to make sure that we're able to deploy this in a coordinated way, because there's substantial state and federal resources that are currently on the table. I'm specifically thinking of the expanded weatherization dollars that DHHS has right now, about $200 million. And so certainly I think there's a huge opportunity for increased training in this field right now. There are some barriers to implementation. So again, not a lot of consumer awareness and demand. We don't have enough installers, right? So we need to get more installers, and the costs are high and the rebates are low. I don't know if I would agree that the rebates are low. I think there are pretty significant rebates that are available. But I think one thing is that we need to make sure that as we're electrifying, particularly low-income homes, we're also being able to install solar on those homes, so that if their electrical bill does go up as a result of electrification, which is possible in a cold climate, that they would be offset by solar panels as well. And then the final thing I'll talk about is this greenhouse gas reduction fund. This is kind of the big kahuna of this whole package. So the EPA is going to be distributing $27 billion in grants, and there's three main buckets here. And so for the $14 billion is going to go to 2 to 3 awards to a national nonprofit that will capitalize a national green bank and be able to get that money into communities. And Michigan Saves is going to be part of an application for that likely. And then there's the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. And so that is essentially 100% of that money should be spent in low income and disadvantaged communities. They're going to be working specifically with CDFIs or community development financial institutions and green banks to get that money into the community. And so folks can get up to 5 million in grants for each of those lenders. And then there's the 7 billion solar for all competition, where up to 60 awards. So these are essentially going to go to the states and the territories. So Michigan should get a grant like this. And so I think this is really going to help to move forward the low-income solar situation in the state of Michigan. And I'm frankly, very excited about that opportunity to be able to increase the penetration of low-income solar in low-income households, because we know that currently most solar is installed in higher income households just because of the capital outlay that's required for that. So again, there's my graphic. You can feel free to download that from the link, or also, I also believe the SBND has that resource, my handout also on the website as well. So I will wrap it up there and say thanks a lot, and I look forward to questions at the end. Thanks so much. And I'll pass it over to Jerry Davis from U of M.
Oh, thanks very much, Joel. That was great. And I'm really going to try to build on what Joel was just describing and translate it to what does all of this mean for small and medium-sized businesses. So Joel has described very ably all of these sort of wild tax benefits, employment benefits, potential grants. And what I've tried to do at my course at the University of Michigan is translate this to what it means for small businesses and entrepreneurs, particularly in the city of Detroit. So SBN Detroit did a lovely job of giving us a write-up on our course on designing the equitable enterprise. What I wanted to do was give you a very quick business education that is updated based on what's been happening in sort of the world of technology in the last few years. So think of this as your 3-minute business school. I will not be collecting any tuition checks for this. This is totally free. And so thinking about how you can create an enterprise using some of these opportunities, how the IRA can help. So what does it take to start a business? What are the components that you need if you want to start a business? Even a nonprofit, they all have these same basic components. We need money. We need capital to fund the thing. We need labor to do the work. We need supplies, distribution. This is how we get it out to the customers. We need some form of organization to put all of these parts together. Any business is going to have all of these components. What's interesting is that the way that we put businesses together looks really different now than it has in the past. And so I think the greatest innovation in the last sort of century has probably been the Instant Pots, one of my favorite products for making soups and stews and all kinds of food. And it's been a fantastic business success story, but you really couldn't have made the Instant Pot 20 years ago. The entire business model depends on technological innovations. So how did the guy that started this company build this thing? It was designed and self-financed by an unemployed computer engineering PhD around 2008. He launched it on Amazon. He did not manufacture these things. Production was done through Alibaba in China. His marketing was listed on Amazon and have fulfillment by Amazon, get it into the hands of customers. The marketing budget was essentially sending Instant Pots to 200 food bloggers and cookbook authors and paying attention to the Amazon reviews. And they sent it out through Amazon. This thing is a fantastic success. They sell 300,000 of these on Prime Day alone. The company only had 50 employees somewhere outside Ottawa. And the reason for this is that all of the parts to create a business today can be rented more or less online. Capital, labor, supply, distribution, all of these parts have been really transformed by information and communication technologies. And so in some sense, we're living in a world where the parts to create a business are like a pile of Legos waiting to be assembled into an enterprise. So I want to tell you a bit of a shaggy dog story and then bring it back to the IRA. So what does this sort of transformation of the building blocks of business mean for creating, say, a restaurant? I'll walk through really quickly how the smartphone changed how we eat and what we eat. And you'll see the relevance of this shaggy dog story in a moment here. So pandemic and smartphones have completely changed the way that we shop for everything, including how we buy food. There's kind of a screen standing between us and the outside world in almost everything we buy these days. One of the things that happened during the pandemic was we saw the rise of virtual restaurants. If you're ordering food on DoorDash or Uber Eats, you don't really know what happens between you placing the order and the food showing up at your front door. All kinds of things could be going on. And so we saw the substitution of virtual restaurants, where instead of cooking it at the name on the brand, it's cooked in a ghost kitchen or in somebody else's kitchen and then delivered by a delivery service. This can lead to some strange outcomes. On the internet, nobody knows your Chuck E. Cheese. The children's rodent-themed restaurant, Chuck E. Cheese, started advertising online Pasquale's Pizza and Wings, because nobody would ever order a Chuck E. Cheese pizza to go, as far as I can tell, but they would order from Pasquale's. So Chuck E. Cheese started marketing pizza under this other brand name and serving as a ghost kitchen. Well, now there's an entire industry of ghost kitchens where you can launch a restaurant entirely online and just rent space at a commissary kitchen to make the food and get it delivered to people. Now, DoorDash is getting into the act. In addition to delivering the food, they're now staffing kitchens. You send them the recipes and they will actually make the food, manage suppliers, and get the food into the hands of customers. How crazy can this get? The social media company TikTok has now launched a restaurant that's entirely online, food that goes viral on TikTok. You can now order it from your phone in the app. The order goes to one of 1,000 ghost kitchens across the US and then is delivered to your home using a Grubhub driver. So what? That's weird. This is one of the ways that technology and things like smartphones change the way that you can put a business model together. It opens up possibilities that you might not have thought of before. Meanwhile, more traditional businesses like Taco Bell have also been transformed by smartphones. There's now a fun new flavor of Taco Bell where you order on an app on your phone. When you pull up into this 2-story Taco Bell, you scan a QR code, and then a tiny elevator brings the food down and puts it into your car. Well, that's kind of wild. You go back to a normal restaurant, they've also been transformed by QR codes. You now often don't encounter a waiter or waitress. You get a QR code and essentially order online, and the food shows up at your table. Well, that's pretty weird. I'm not sure this has been great for creative, healthy, high-quality food, but it's been a real technological transformation. It could have gone in a really different direction. So food trucks are an example of a business entirely enabled by smartphones. You order on the phone, you see the menu, you find out where the truck is going to be using smartphones, and this enables great opportunities for entrepreneurs like Detroit 75, my personal favorite food truck in Southwest. It's run by one of our Stanford MBA or one of our Michigan MBA students, named one of the best food trucks in America, enabled essentially by smartphones. So what does this mean for the Inflation Reduction Act if you're a small business or a potential entrepreneur? The Inflation Reduction Act essentially creates opportunities in each of these components for business. So in labor, in capital, and distribution supply, all of these things, the opportunities have been changed by the Inflation Reduction Act. So the IRA includes large incentives for consumers to swap out their old furnaces and water heaters and gas stoves for electric appliances. There's money for upgrading their electrical system if they need it. There's tax credits for buying electric vehicles. So all of a sudden, there's a potential flood of new customers for these specific kinds of businesses. It also includes grants, loans, tax incentives for businesses to upgrade buildings and energy infrastructure. And there's opportunities to hire labor at prevailing wages, including apprentices. So each of those components of business, there's opportunities created through the Inflation Reduction Act. So example of this that Joel mentioned is that for lower income consumers, you can receive a rebate covering the full cost of a heat pump installation for up to $8,000. $1,750 for a heat pump water heater, $840 for an electric stove, an electric clothes dryer. If you need to upgrade your electric, there's opportunities for up to $4,000 for a breaker box, $2,000 for electrical wiring. So for a homeowner, this is great. This is essentially free money to do an upgrade to electrify your house. For a business owner, this is a whole lot of potential customers that didn't exist before. You can drive down the street, and if you see homeowners, those are opportunities for businesses, which is kind of great. What about employing people and providing better wages? Well, there's sections of the Inflation Reduction Act about paying prevailing wages and employing apprentices. I will put a link in the chat momentarily, but there's a lot of great opportunities for being a well-paid employer. If you're a housing developer, great opportunities for those that are creating affordable housing, also described in a link that I will be sharing out. So I teach this class at the University of Michigan on equitable enterprises, and the whole theme is how can we design businesses that contribute to their community, that keep the money within the community, that are run by community members, that create jobs locally. Our whole goal is how do we create opportunities for local businesses? And we just see the Inflation Reduction Act as a pretty great opportunity for local businesses, particularly contractors, but more broadly than that, financial institutions as well. The difficulty that Joel mentioned is that this is not really necessarily thoroughly comprehensible. Normal people can't read legislation and say, oh, that sounds great to me. So we thought, what can we do with a room full of really smart Michigan graduate students? How about we put them to work translating components of the Inflation Reduction Act and other opportunities into plain English so that you could look up this how-to guide and say, what are the 5 steps that I need to know, to work with the CDFI or to get health insurance for my employees? So this is greenbiztransition.com, and I'll paste a link in shortly. And we have a set of guides on business strategy and planning, funding, HR benefits, getting health insurance for you and your people, saving or earning money with green energy, dealing with contractors. So we have a set of how-to guides that the students wrote, and they're pretty great. I have to say our students are really smart, and they got some advice from Kimberly and others to make sure that these were sort of well-grounded and accessible. So how do I get my business certified as a diverse-owned business, which opens up some opportunities? What do you have to do to get that certification? What is a CDFI, Community Development Finance Institution? How do I apply for a loan from a CDFI? What the heck is in the Inflation Reduction Act for small businesses? So I have a set of how-to guides that are pretty accessible, short, reader-friendly that we put out there. We also created a set of business models, and we've posted those on the web as well. I'll post a link in a second here for different flavors of business models. And think of these as being like concept cars. We don't think you're necessarily going to grab one of these and run with it. But if you scroll through these models, you might see some elements that you could use as well, creative uses of funding and opportunities for labor and beyond. And that's really what we were trying to do, is just to translate some of these new opportunities to be very accessible to small and medium-sized businesses. So thanks very much. It's really been great to speak with you all, and I look forward to the questions.
Thanks, Jerry. This is Dan Radomski with Centropolis Accelerator. I'll build a little bit off of Joel and Jerry's content and what they're able to provide on the Inflation Reduction Act. And I'll talk a little bit broader about all that's available in the kind of clean energy and sustainability space, including the earlier bipartisan infrastructure law that resulted in infrastructure spending, as well as traditional funding that's available in the sustainability space through the Department of Energy, other agencies, and nonprofits. So when you hear $1 trillion, it's always it piques your interest. But I think understanding, based on the unique nature of your entity, whether you're a nonprofit, for-profit business, startup, established business, your municipality, your community trying to bring clean energy and sustainability into your operations, where do you go to? Where do you start? How do you navigate this? And how do you know how the money's going to flow, right? So in some cases, money flows through the federal government to the state energy office, and then even through nonprofits before programs made available, for instance, to take advantage of energy efficiency for a homeowner. So I think Joel did an excellent job of kind of explaining how some of this money is allocated, whether it goes to CDFIs, state agencies, nonprofits. So we hope to, even after this webinar, be able to provide more detail and structure around that to help your individual businesses. I was asked to specifically speak about funding and support that is available for technology developers in the clean energy and sustainability space, as well as manufacturers that are developing products or already manufacturing clean energy components, materials, systems, whether it's electric vehicles, solar, wind, what have you. Our mission is unique in that we support both. Those are developing new hard tech solutions, and those that are already in manufacturing, helping them become more efficient, more energy efficient, and reducing their emissions. So we have a kind of unique model on how we do that. Training curriculum called Build for Scale that I developed for the Department of Energy that helps people design, engineer, prototype, and bring their product to market. I think we're the only incubator in the world that has in-house design, engineering, and prototyping. So we have professional engineers that can help you if you have an idea, bring your product to market, tool it up, and get it ready for manufacturing. And our whole mission is to get those products manufactured right here in our home state of Michigan. So on the clean tech, climate tech, circular economy landscape, what we call kind of sustainability funding. If you're more on the development side, or you're actually developing new product and just looking over the attendees, there's a few of our clients and those that I know are developing products. It's really important to understand what your stage of development is and how that applies to different funding opportunities. So we like to measure where you are in your technology readiness levels. If you're a startup or you're developing new technology as an established business. And if you're really early stage, like TR levels 1 to 3, there's very specific programs to support that, like small business innovative research grants. There's the ARPA-E program and other things, accelerators as you get a little more advanced. Our C3 accelerator that stands for Clean Tech, Climate Tech, Circular Economy Companies is more of a growth stage accelerator. It's looking to work with companies that are later stage. They develop a prototype. Now they need to move towards production and market readiness. And that provides funding and support for developing the product. But you can see here, venture capital and other kind of institutional funding traditionally comes on later. And you can see here on this diagram how the bipartisan infrastructure law, CHIP Act, and IRA generally comes in when the technologies are mature and ready for deployment, or already are ready for deployment and scale. And that's true for the 48C and 45 tax credits as well. If you're doing general product development, early stage, there's traditional R&D tax credits that are available at the state level. So here's a little bit of a landscape. When we think about sustainability, it's not always the Department of Energy that is providing funding and support for this, but there's the Environmental Protection Agency. DoD funds a lot of support for this, as well as NSF, and with all that's going into electric vehicles, Department of Transportation as well, especially EV charging. Very early stage technology is a wonderful program called ARPA-E, that Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy. And you can see a rather significant, funding, 400 million plus, that goes into early stage technology development, a wide variety of energy innovation pillars. If you're new to the Department of Energy, I have a very complicated org chart, but it's good to get really familiarized with how your technology maps to these programs. Like I saw on the attendee list, a couple of companies I know are developing solar technologies. The DOE within the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office, ERE, has a solar program, and they have regular solicitations, including SBIRs and traditional programs that help support technology development, and in some cases even demonstration projects. There's a wind and water energy program, geothermal, advanced manufacturing office, vehicle technologies office, and other groups that specifically are really shaping the way for what innovations we need to decarbonize and to be more sustainable. There's a big concentration on industrial or more energy efficient and industrialize or electrifying buildings of all type, whether it be residential, commercial, and industrial applications. It's all of this is online. You can easily get into and take a look at the budgets that have been committed, as well as the funding opportunities that are available, what the proposed budgets are for the next fiscal year. You can connect with the agency leads. They regularly have annual merit review programs. I was just at the Department of Energy's Advanced Manufacturing Office, Industrial Decarbonization Office merit review meeting. Had a chance to meet with not only all of the office administrators there, but companies, national labs, and universities that have received significant research awards. So if you're in the research space, you're a startup, you're developing technology, this is the place to start, no doubt about it. Get familiar with the R&D roadmaps, get familiar with the teams that are supporting those projects, and try to introduce your ideas to be considered for support to advance your technology readiness levels. There's also manufacturing research institutes. Some have been funded by the Department of Energy or Department of Defense, Department of Commerce. Some are very energy related, sustainability related, like the Remade Institute, Smart Manufacturing Institute. We have a couple in our that are operating out of Michigan, like the Lightweight Metals Institute. That's all about reducing emissions in vehicles. And so they're quite often put together as a public-private partnership with federal, state funding, and private funding, and have calls for research, development, and deployment projects. As these may align very specifically with your technology or the products you're manufacturing, they're good groups to consider getting involved in. DOE over the last 2 years has also tried to seed both early stage and later stage technologies through what they call American made prizes. These are smaller dollar amounts, could be $50,000, $100,000, in some cases excess of $1 million award pools. Very simpler proposals to submit, often by PowerPoint decks, and it seeks to help you develop the product, to prove it out, to validate it, and to do that in partnerships in some cases with DOE departments, national labs, and others. And as we transition to the bipartisan infrastructure law, also known as the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, IIJA, there's already been a rather significant contribution to clean energy and sustainability infrastructure, as well as obviously investments into broadband and pipeline infrastructure, water infrastructure. But a lot of this is sustainability infrastructure and to decarbonize our economy, right? So this came out over a year ago, $1 trillion plus. A lot of this money is flowing through state agencies and departments that will deploy to scale. And you'll see $73 billion to provide a cleaner and more resilient power grid, rather significant $40 billion to public transit. A lot of that's going into electric bus, electric rail systems, $7.5 billion in EV charging and a national network of EV charging to support the rollout of electric vehicles. And what's less obvious here is the funding that you see that's going to airports and water ports. A lot of that is also going to be dedicated to sustainability projects. There was also the announcement of the CHIPS Act. Everybody's a little bit familiar with the semiconductor shortage and our supply chain constraints here. So that funding is to help lift up domestic manufacturing of semiconductor chips, packaging, all up and down the supply chain, as well as support research, development, our defense, security in this area, and workforce development. And then there was the IRA, which I think Joel and Jerry did a very good job of sharing details on. But if you think about the bipartisan infrastructure law, IIJA, as creating the funding that we need to support infrastructure, think of the IRA as a funding mechanism to support the deployment of those technologies, whether they're clean vehicles, energy efficiency for homes, and clean energy manufacturing. So, and this grid does a fairly good job of kind of explaining what was in the bipartisan infrastructure law versus on the left, the Inflation Reduction Act. So a lot of money that went into help support the deployments of energy efficiency in buildings of all type, including in the residential for the first time, as Joel mentioned. Extension of long-term tax credits for supporting wind turbine projects, solar parks, and for the first time, energy storage, which is critical to being able to store energy from renewables to provide, 24/7 clean energy power. Then you'll see quite a commitment to a wide variety of things, including manufacturing of clean energy systems, which I'll talk about here in a bit. These tax credits, as Joel had mentioned, are some available, as tax credits to consumers, as well as businesses for implementing clean energy systems and programs. What I particularly like about the commitment in the line of Energy Justice 40, as Joel mentioned, is if you're developing, let's say, a solar project, a wind energy project, energy storage project, and you commit to do that in a low-income community, those tax credits have additional value up to 10 to 20% for locating those projects in those communities. There's even additional bonus if it's in a what they call energy legacy community, and that's communities that have housed coal plants or refineries and are trying to transition to a cleaner future, brownfield sites, that type of thing. And on top of that, if you're using domestic content, right, solar panels, wind turbines, battery storage that is manufactured domestically, there's additional tax credits that are provided. So there was a lot of thought and process that went around this to ensure that we are developing sustainable projects in communities that need it the most, and really encouraging domestic manufacturing of all these systems. So the Inflation Reduction Act really supports both, right, supply and demand of climate solutions. And if we have future seminars or workshops around this, we'll really dig into this in greater detail to help people understand this better. On the tax credit side, there's what's known as the 45X tax credits, and you can see they're very specific tax credits to support deployment of projects that are very specific to renewable energy, wind, solar, versus carbon capture, commercial vehicles, clean hydrogen production, and the like. Then there's also what's known as the 48C tax credits. Those 48C tax credits are specifically dedicated for manufacturing investment commitments. So these are commitments that are made domestically to manufacture solar, wind, geothermal, electric grid equipment, fuel cells, energy storage, carbon capture, basically any product that is having a net impact on reducing emissions with a lower levelized cost of energy, and obviously having that domestic job creation value of lifting up a production operation in the US. And if you commit to those, again, in low income communities or energy legacy communities, there's even greater 48C tax values for that. So think of 48C as production tax credits that support full systems, and 45X supporting individual components. So there's those that are maybe just making inverters that go into solar panels, or the raw materials and components that go into solar and wind and battery components, as well as the critical minerals and materials that may find their way into battery cells, like cobalt, nickel. So those that are mining, processing, and manufacturing those materials to be integrated into an electrode, into a battery, for instance, are also receiving opportunities for tax credits for domestic operations. So really a unique opportunity, as Joel and Jerry had mentioned, unprecedented amount of funding and support to ensure that we have not only a transition to a clean energy future, but the manufacturing and supply chain jobs that help support that over the next decade or two of development. And here's a couple other webinars that we have, Centropolis has led, including with the state of Michigan, that provides more details on these incentives, including the tax credits that are available for manufacturers and research and development firms. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those presentations. I think everyone who is listening today would certainly agree that this was very good information that can certainly be applied at many different levels, the municipal level, in your individual businesses, and would certainly strengthen our communities and move us much closer to a clean energy community and society. And so, you know, it's interesting as I was listening to this, and we were talking before this discussion started, and we talked about the unprecedented nature of this particular bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and all of the kind of background work that took place even before President Biden was elected. Many of the environmental justice leaders and business leaders and other notable community leaders who really care about addressing climate change came together and said, we have to do something. And so we know that climate change is real. In fact, reportedly, global temperatures are being pushed into uncharted territory, which is causing flooding, food insecurity, and the destruction of vital ecosystems. We are in trouble. But I heard a pastor say that whenever there is a great problem or great challenges, there are also great opportunities, and we are certainly at that moment. But collaboration is key. And I learned this firsthand when leading the development of the City of Detroit's first climate action plan, and how we brought different people together from various sectors to address this issue. So my question to you is, I want each of you to really talk about the collaborative approach that is needed to effectively address climate change and take advantage of the IRA funding. And Joel, we can start with you.
I'm sorry, Kimberly, can you restate the question? I want to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
Yes, I want each of you to really talk about the importance of collaboration and using a collaborative and innovative approach to address climate change, and how to take advantage and how that collaboration and innovation can position organizations or municipalities, state government to take advantage of the IRA funding.
Yeah, no, thank you. Great question. I do think collaboration is super key to being able to be successful with the IRA funding. Just because addressing sustainability and climate change obviously is a multifaceted affair. Even just looking at the even just targeting like the residential housing space, for instance, right? So we know that there's all this electrification dollars that are coming in, right? But we also know that many houses, especially in places like Detroit, aren't necessarily ready to be electrified, right? There's a lot of things that need to happen to those homes even before we can start to move down the electrification standpoint. And so essentially, like, the opportunity that we've often talked about is like, well, how do you partner with the community action agencies that manage the money to do home weatherization or home repair dollars, right? To get that business, to get that homeowner then ready to actually take advantage of the electrification opportunities. And so I think that's an example of that would have to be a collaborative opportunity where the community action agency is serving as kind of the intake and the pivot point, but then there's opportunities for a private contractor potentially to do some of this work and use the rebates. I think also obviously like Michigan Saves or another entity like that that's providing some financing on the front end would be a very important piece in that collaboration as well, to be able to enable particularly low-income people to take advantage of some of these tax credits, because if you don't have a tax liability, it's going to be hard to take advantage of tax credits. So being able to monetize those. I mean, one unique aspect of the Inflation Reduction Act is that there is, for many of the tax credits, there is a pay through. It's I'm not using the right word. What's the right word, Dan? Opportunity to get paid directly, to get the tax credit paid directly to you as a nonprofit. Yeah, no, it's a pay. I'm totally blanking on the name of it, but basically you don't have to have a tax liability with many of the new opportunities that are in the IRA, and you can get paid directly for the value of that credit. So
Wow.
I'll turn it over to Dan and Jerry for more thoughts.
Yeah, I think one thing I'll point out is collaboration is key for everything you see in the IRA. I'll give you an example of what Joel was talking about. The amount of dollars they're trying to push into residential energy efficiency, especially in low-income communities. There just isn't enough companies doing that right now, doing home energy assessments, implementations. There's groups like Carla Walker Miller's group that does a fabulous job. I've talked to her. This is one of the biggest constraints is being able to produce enough talent that knows how to do energy audits for residential. It's actually a great business opportunity. So getting our economic development groups in to be able to educate, this is a great business opportunity to launch new businesses and to help execute on this is just a wonderful opportunity that involves workforce development, economic development groups, and the communities we're trying to serve. The other thing I'll say is I love what's in the IRA to help support projects like doing renewables and especially energy legacy communities, right? They've had shuttered coal plants and they've had a downturn in the economy. And but this can't be a push of someone that has a solar project development background pushing into that community. It needs to involve the community's not just involvement, but ownership. Let's find a way for that community to own that project and the benefits from that project, including the manufacturing, the installation, the servicing, and so they're not, just taken advantage of, but they have an economic development opportunity built into it. So that involves and requires collaboration at many fronts. We have to remember too that a lot of this money too is often being channeled to the Department of Energy, to either our Michigan Department of Transportation in the case of EV charging, or the Department of our energy office through Eagle, right? So they're going to naturally offer grants and programs, and often it's not directly through them. That's what I meant about it's really important that everybody understands how the money flows. Often the state energy office will contract a nonprofit who then will run a energy efficiency program for residential or for commercial or for industrial. So that, collaborating with those nonprofits and the communities they're going to serve, the people they're going to serve to execute on these sustainability projects is going to require a lot of collaboration.
Yeah, I'm going to say that feels exactly right. And just to reinforce what both Dan and Joel were saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes an ecosystem to take on the climate emergency. So you might have a home construction building and you have contractors. They might not be able to get the trained labor that they need without either, union training or community college training. Can you get the supplies to install heat pumps, let's say? Can you get the bridge financing to pay your people while you're waiting yourself to get paid? So it really does take a whole ecosystem, but that means opportunities in places you might not have realized. So there's a lot of reasons to not like Wall Street and the finance profession. One thing that they're really good at is taking things that have a long-term payoff and paying for them now. Like, I want to build this airport. It's going to take 50 years to pay off, but I can find investors to give me the money now. It's going to create future benefits. I can pay that off. So much of green energy investments have that exact flavor to them. So I want to build a multi-unit housing development. I might use sad stick construction that is not necessarily the best because I have an incentive to do it as cheaply as possible now to get it on the market. But if you're thinking, what is the total cost of ownership of something like this. If I'm thinking this is going to be there for 50 years, we should make it financially feasible for developers to create something that is, net zero. And there's a lot of money available now through the IRA and other sources to build it right now so that it will last, so that it will be energy efficient into the future. It's a case where the short term is the enemy of the long term, like the ability to build quickly and cheaply. It's often easier to take that choice. It's kind of like, eating a bag of Doritos for dinner, because you won't be, you'll be full, but you're not going to get the nutrition. How do we create the right incentives? There are places for financial institutions and others to help make that happen. So there's like the business opportunities are in all kinds of different sectors: education, energy, construction. There's just so many opportunities, and they kind of all need to be taken so that they can all work together and reinforce each other.
Thank you. That was a great response to the question of collaboration. And so, when you look at these different terms, ESG, CSR, corporate social responsibility, environmental, social and governance, and then the triple bottom line, people. And so you see the S that runs through the middle of all of these terms, or these three main terms. And what I would love to see is for the municipalities, the utility companies, the environmental justice leaders, the academic community, the healthcare community, all of these communities come together to talk about how we address climate change, how we take advantage of the IRA, how do we transition to a clean energy economy. And I think that now is the time. Wouldn't it be something if the Mackinac conference or some other large gathering could specifically have a focus on this type of convening and really make it a solution oriented type of convening. So I want the business leaders on this Zoom link to really begin to think about that type of innovation, because I think that now is the time that we can do that. Additionally, I want to draw your attention to the NAACP cold-blooded report. It's an older report, but it really kind of talks about communities that have been in proximity to coal-fired power plants and the issues that they have had to encounter over the years or throughout their time of being in these locations. And so that is a very good report to reference. So Joel, I have a question for you. What types of investments do businesses need to be making to prepare for the IRA dollars?
Well, certainly, I think, training and workforce training, I think, is primarily among those, right? Because a lot of the dollars are tied to specific technologies or specific techniques of doing things, whether it be looking at weatherization, whether it be looking at electrification, heat pump technology, utilizing heat pump technology, installing solar. So electricians, are going to have a lot of work in the next few years, and we frankly don't have enough of them. And so I think certainly training up and hiring more electricians and making sure that either the folks on your staff and then the folks you hire have those opportunities. I think also, employers need to make sure they're able to provide those wraparound services to folks who maybe they're returning citizens or have other challenges in their life, have a lack of transportation. So I think really to be able to make sure that the impacts of these investments are helping those folks who need it the most. Employers, I think, need to really take a holistic, view each employee as a whole person, and having the many challenges and banning the box, right? Not asking about previous convictions on employment applications is certainly a good start, because if we're not including those folks in our economic recovery, we're leaving a whole bunch of great minds and strong bodies out of this opportunity, and I think it's a shame. So I think just training workforce and treating people as whole people would be the one way that I'd say. I think there's lots of others, but I'll I'll let Dan and Jerry.
I can add to
Fine.
Joel's comments. I mean, there's the interesting thing, there is job opportunities all up and down, right? From technicians to engineers to manufacturing. And it's really, it's going to take a concentrated effort in workforce development from existing manufacturers to universities and other job training organization nonprofits. And we were talking a lot about the technicians, right? To go out there and do assessments and installations of clean energy efficiency technologies. But I talked a lot about manufacturing. Make no mistake about this. If you follow what's in the Science Act, this is very strategic and focusing on domestic manufacturing, not just to take advantage of all the funding that's going. It's because we have major supply chain gaps, We do not make, it's not just semiconductors we don't make. You know, we don't make e-motors. We barely make batteries and the raw materials that go into them, right? And these are critical materials that are important for our national security as much as everything else. And obviously with the conflicts with Russia and China and everything else, there's a reason why that is there's a concentration in the IRA specifically around us focusing on that. So we need education in all those areas, battery engineering, power electronics, there's not enough training to help support the next generation of engineers as we electrify everything, right? Not just vehicles, but it also it presents a great opportunity, right? To improve our workforce, our talent, and to create opportunities for jobs and wealth.
You know, and this really kind of talks about the importance of community colleges and the role that they can play in creating this talent that is desperately needed right now.
Kimberly, can I piggyback on some of Dan's comments around supply chain?
Yes.
I think that's massive, right? We know that the domestic supply chain is woefully inadequate here. I think one thing that we want to start thinking about too is the majority of the materials that go into our lithium ion batteries are from folks around the world that we maybe don't have great relationships with or don't have great human rights records. And so I think that it's important too that we start thinking about where are we sourcing our raw materials. And actually one of my colleagues here at PSC, Colin Seals, posted something on LinkedIn about mining to mobility. So thinking about Michigan has a rich mining history, and obviously we've not always done the right thing in that realm, but wouldn't it be great if we could develop ecologically sensitive operations that we're getting the materials, copper and other things that we need for battery chemistry going forward, so that we're actually creating jobs domestically, doing it in an environmentally responsible manner, and also being able to source things locally. So I think there are tremendous opportunities all up and down the supply chain to be able to create jobs and create new industries and new businesses to fulfill the mandates of the IRA and other federal funding.
Thank you. Jerry, Professor Davis, what did you learn from talking to small business owners in Detroit? Particularly, what were their worries about energy cost and reliability?
Yeah, it was really interesting when we did the poll at the start of this conversation. The sort of top concern was sustainability, like green energy. That was half the respondents to the survey. That was not at all what we were getting from our interviews with small business owners in Detroit. So my students interviewed 40 to 50 small business owners, community members, community leaders, and asked them what were your big worries. The overwhelming one was reliability. So you know, the sustainability was somewhere on the list of the top half dozen, but reliability was a huge issue. And what we found was there were a lot of pain points out there, that there were a lot of business owners who would say, if my power goes off for 3 days, my people do not show up for work. I can't pay them. They might start looking for work elsewhere. If it's a restaurant, I got a refrigerator full of food that I have to throw out. And if this happens, 2 times in 2 or 3 months, this is a really big problem for small businesses. So that came up over and over again, issues about sort of reliability and access. And they're not sure where best to address this issue. So you can't, within the city of Detroit, you can't sort of band together with 20 other neighborhood businesses and create a locavore power grid. Like you might imagine, everybody, let's put solar panels on the roof, and we'll put banks of batteries in the basements of those folks that have room for it. We'll just have a local grid. Can't do that in Detroit, not yet, not at this moment. So some of the more decentralized solutions that one might think of are not really quite as accessible in Detroit. Some things that came up that I had not did not occur to me until the interviews was, I thought geothermal was an obvious choice in a place with so much vacant land. Like, how about district geothermal? It's like, well, in Detroit, you don't know necessarily what's 3 feet under the soil. It isn't always well documented. If you go back far enough, you might be surprised by what's directly below the surface, and that had not occurred to me at all. But that also came up. And then there was just a really strong community feeling. One of the things that I love most about Detroit is kind of the entrepreneurial vibe is one of mutual support and community feeling. And I just don't, I lived in California for a while in Silicon Valley, and business owners there, they like to call themselves entrepreneurs. They are delighted to see other people fail. Like there's this feeling of schadenfreude to see, oh, did you hear that this business, finally went under? And it's not a great thing. There's kind of a weird sense to it. In Detroit, the vibe that I always get is mutual support. Like, thank you for moving to the neighborhood. Let me tell you about some good suppliers. Here's some things you need to know. Here's 3 neighborhood leaders you ought to get acquainted with. And just that mutual support, that community feeling of how do we make this neighborhood take off? How do we make this city take off? That's just really special. That plus its location around fresh water, I think, is one of the reasons, and it's, international location, I think, is some of the reasons why Detroit is poised to thrive, and that we're really on the verge of this opportunity for neighborhood-based businesses that can, help address the racial wealth gap, create jobs within the city. Anyway, I'm going on a bit there, but those are the things that came out. The vibe, the reliability and concerns about that, and some of the limitations on more collaborative or locally based distributed solutions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor Davis. And let's take a question from the audience. And again, I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please indicate who the question is for and put it in the Q&A or in the chat, but preferably in the Q&A so that we can get all of your questions answered. So we do have a question from Tracy, and this is to Professor Davis. What is the wage requirement for this part of the IRA? How is this determined?
Yeah, so I would love to claim that I'm a giant expert on the Department of Labor. Sadly, I am not just yet, but I can share a link to the Department of Labor's website, where they have a pretty great deck that walks you through some of the details on apprenticeships and prevailing wage rules. And then it has some links that you can drill down on to get more detail about how that applies to your specific situation.
Okay, great. Dan, I've got a question for you. How does Michigan stand to benefit from the IRA tax credits? And this is taking into consideration the labor shortage as well as some of the supply chain issues.
Yeah, so I'll answer that in 2 ways. One is we already have quite a few manufacturers of clean energy products and components. A lot of people don't realize we still have battery cell manufacturing with LG and Clarios, Zalt, Navitas, others. We have module production here with Prime Energy, Piston Group, and others. So obviously those companies are going to benefit. They are all in the process of scaling, and in order to scale, to take on new projects and do more work and employ more people, taking advantage of, the investments they make that can be supported with tax credits is going to be critical, right? It'll allow them to grow quicker and hire more. And we have, solar companies, we have, wind tower manufacturer and vent tower. Unfortunately, we don't make panels, but we make components that go into panels, including polycrystalline silicon by Hemlock Semiconductor. These are big and small companies. They all stand to benefit. And then it also provides an attraction opportunity because Michigan is a place where we will deploy a lot of clean energy systems, right? And not just renewables, but electric vehicles in particular, and that helps us attract everything from e-motor companies to semiconductor companies. We've had some success in attracting some companies already to the state, and combination of both state incentives and tax credits can go a long way to push a company to want to be in Michigan and manufacturing here, especially with our heritage of designing, engineering, prototyping, and manufacturing products.
Great. I think it's called Sono Motors that came to, I think they're from Germany, somewhere in Europe. And I received an invitation on LinkedIn, and they were coming to Detroit, Eastern Market. And that was my first time seeing a Moss plant growing in the car. And they talked about how it purified the air, and it was a solar panel car. And it was just incredible to see that type of innovation. And what was more incredible was their interest in working in Michigan. So I don't know whatever happened to that, but you're right. I think that Michigan is becoming a lot more attractive to many different companies. But that's great to hear, to see how prepared we are to take advantage of the resources that are coming our way. Joel, my next question is for you. If you were talking to Mayor Duggan and the new sustainability director, what is the first project you would recommend to them for them to pursue? And what is the low-hanging fruit, do you believe, in the city of Detroit that would propel them, or to position them rather, to take advantage of the IRA funding?
A great question, Kimberly. So I'm very passionate about the fact that most people's interaction with climate and sustainability is with their homes, right? Is with the house that they live in, right? So we get an energy bill for that house. We're cold or we're hot in that house. We're healthy or not healthy in that house. And so I guess I'm very passionate that that's the way to utilize sustainability dollars or climate dollars to dramatically impact the people's quality of life in their homes, right? And so the advice I would give to Jack and the mayor it would be that you all should make sure you are coordinating with all the agencies that are doing that work in the city, and coordinating with the Wayne Metro Community Action Agency, coordinating with Walker Miller Energy Services, coordinating with the Detroit at Work Employment Office, to ensure that we have a coordinated approach to improving the quality of housing for Detroiters, right? So Detroiters don't care where the money is coming from or who's doing the work. Well, they do care, obviously, if it's not quality work, but they just want the work done on their house and their house to be improved. And so I would say my advice would be, let's take a coordinated approach to deploying this money so that we can maximize the number of Detroiters that have a positive impact in their homes. They have a house that's less expensive to heat and cool. They have a house that has fewer internal toxins and fewer allergens present, and they have a more consistent, a more stable investment that they can pass on to their children and grandchildren. And so that's what I would say to Jack, because I know the mayor really wants to solarize all the city buildings, and I think that's a great ambition and a good one, and wants to electrify the city fleet, which I kind of helped start when I was at the city. And so I'm excited to see that stuff happening too, and that stuff's great. But I'm a passionate believer that we want to impact people in their their most expensive asset, which is generally their house,
Mhm.
right? And help them improve that to the extent that we can. Because like we've already referenced, a lot of this stuff is not legible for your average everyday homeowner resident, right? And so I think it's up to folks like us and governmental leaders and other nonprofit leaders to make it digestible and have there be a single point of entry where people can access all of these programs and not have to fill out 20 different applications to be able to access them. So make it easy for people, and then we can improve the quality of life of as many Detroiters as possible.
Very well stated. And of course, you would know as you led the development of the sustainability agenda, and now the climate action plan is being developed. You know, what's interesting, and as we hear more and more talk around energy poverty, and I know I've been invited to speak all over the country, and it's one of the things that I've spoken about, but we have somebody right at the University of Michigan who's really the expert on this particular issue, Professor Tony Reams. And so energy poverty is a bread and butter issue. You are essentially paying 2 mortgages for 1 house. And so investing, having the city and encouraging the city to invest in home repairs that would reduce the energy burden is very, very important. And let's not forget about the importance of indoor air quality. A lot of times we talk about outdoor air quality, but what's happening right in the house, particularly with families that have younger children. And so I think is certainly more discussion informed that we need to have, and who knows, maybe there will be a part 2. Professor Davis, I have a question for you. As we move to a clean energy future, what kind of opportunities are available now that might not be obvious to potential entrepreneurs? And I want you to talk about your how-to guides and some of the demo projects that your students created.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for that. We at the university have worked with small businesses and entrepreneurs in Detroit for several years, particularly through DNEP, the Detroit Neighborhood Entrepreneurs Project. And we provide free services to small businesses like free accounting help and legal assistance, marketing, and things like that. And a lot of entrepreneurs, what leads them into the world of business is they have a really good product that they think the world is going to love. And they really want to get their product into the hands of people. So they've got an amazing brownie recipe or a really cool t-shirt, or they got like personal care products that they want to get out there to the world. And so they start with a great product and then don't necessarily attend to some of the other things like, do I have a way to fund this? How am I going to recruit labor? Do I have some way to get this stuff into the hands of customers that's particularly sustainable? And so what we try to do is be really systematic in thinking, are there opportunities available because there's new ways to distribute to customers that you might not have thought of before? So if you wanted to start a restaurant, your first thought might be, I have to have some place that's, walking distance where people can sit down and, order their food and have it brought to the table or something like that. But what if instead you say it could be delivered, or what if it could be grab and go? That's an interesting opportunity. If you can make food that's prepared and fresh that people can pick up at a store instead of a restaurant, that's kind of a different business model. So what we've tried to do is think through when there's new changes in technology or in funding, are there new opportunities created for businesses that might expand beyond things that are, really straightforward to people, and particularly business to business things. So some of the opportunities that the students came up with were, Joel mentioned that this, the world of energy can be really confusing and complicated. And that came up in our interviews as well, is that people don't know, where do I turn to answer this question? Like there's 50 things I can do in my house. I got the time and energy to do 3. Which ones are most important to me? So one thought would be something like an energy concierge, some technologically enabled way that you could walk people through what are the most, the best payback options for you in your house. Like you might want to do solar panels, but you'd need to repair the roof first, or your electric, your junction box isn't ready yet. Well, are there other opportunities available to you right now that might be able to pay off? So just helping guide people through what are the options. People thought, well, I'm a renter, and so I'm not eligible for these things. That turns out not to be true. There's also opportunities for renters in the Inflation Reduction Act. Another thing that came up was that there were pretty wild business ideas. Like, you wouldn't necessarily think, how am I going to set up charging stations in neighborhoods across the city? But that is a potential interesting opportunity, given the tax credits for, $7,500 tax credit for certain electric cars like a Ford F-150. There's going to be a lot more electric cars out there. Servicing those things, creating charging stations, that's something that might not be super obvious to people, but could be a really good opportunity. And then we had some wilder thoughts. If the big issue is energy reliability, some of our students thought, well, can we create access to generators or solar batteries for businesses that have lost their power and it might be gone for 3 days? So instead of having the expense of buying an entire generator or having sort of a dirty diesel generator, could we create business opportunities for green generators or green batteries that could be delivered to business or homeowners? So there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of sort of interesting ideas out there that I would sort of point people on the call to that might inspire them to think about things that are a little less obvious than, I'll open a restaurant or, personal care products. There's just so many business opportunities that require a little bit more sort of being a bit more imaginative or creative, I guess.
Thank you. And I was certainly had the opportunity to work with you and your colleague around this particular issue, the how-to guides and the demo projects. And it was a wonderful opportunity just to hear the innovation and to see what they were thinking about and the different people they had spoken with to come to develop these different ideas. So I look forward to what will become of these important documents that were created by the students. So our last question will be from for Dan. We are wrapping up, and Dan, the question is, can you talk about the basic qualifications for receiving IRA tax credits for clean energy manufacturers?
Yeah, so it varies quite a bit, whether it's a system, like a full solar panel versus components, as I mentioned. The federal government just provided details on how a company would qualify and how to apply for them. But you got to remember, this is a tax credit, so you have to have a tax liability. So if you're just developing product and you don't already have it, you're not already manufacturing it, you can go for traditional R&D tax credits that are available through your state. But the federal level, you have to actually be producing it and have made investments to produce it. So that means you had to invest in facilities, equipment, labor. What's nice about these 48C, 45X tax credits is it is including both operating and CapEx investments, which is great. But the devil's in the details. You have to understand it. One thing I would highly recommend is talk to a tax attorney. We have a wonderful tax attorney right here in Michigan, DST Advisors. They helped me put on that tax credit webinar a couple months ago. They're very well educated on state and federal tax credits, how you qualify, how you apply. And if anyone's interested, I'm glad to connect you to them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan. And I would also like to direct everyone's attention to all of the resources in the chat box. Please copy and paste those resources for your information at a later time. And that will conclude the Q&A portion of this discussion this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, and I just have to say, wow, to all of you. Your generosity in sharing your perspective, the depth of expertise and knowledge assembled in this gathering is really, really impressive. And, you know, your, dare I say, caring and passion about creating a sustainable future, and our ability to do that is contagious. So just thank you. I wish we were in person so we could make some noise for you all. So thank you, Joel, Jerry, Dan, and certainly Kimberly for your expert moderation today. We did record this session. So if you give us a minute, we will get that posted on the SBND website, and we also will send it out to everyone a link to everyone who registered today. And maybe, you know, everyone who participated will think about helping to share it out further, because I certainly share your enthusiasm and belief that we need to get everybody knowledgeable and thinking about the possibilities and potential here, because it's just enormous. So thank you so much to all of you and everyone who participated. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.